Joining me now is Lori Turnbull, political analyst. Lori, welcome. Your reaction to the news of Fraser and now Freeland.
Right. So the Fraser bit seemed to leak out last night where it had become more publicly known that this is what he planned to do. And so Sean Fraser's press conference this morning where he explained, this is a conversation he's had with the prime minister. It is time for him to leave politics. He has young children. He wants to be home more. And so it was one of the most thoughtful press conferences I've ever seen for a cabinet minister leaving. Really wanted to stress, when I say I'm leaving to be with my family, I really mean it. And, this is what I'm talking about. And so, of course, Fraser's the coverage of his press conference is cut short with the announcement that Freeland is also leaving. Now, if Fraser had been the only one who left cabinet today, I think that would have honestly been a big enough blow to the prime minister, because Fraser is one of the, one of the more like people who are seen as a rising star in Trudeau's cabinet. He is, I don't even know how many ministers have left now, 5 or 6 or more than that over the past few months. I think, but again, Fraser's departure would have been a hard enough day for the prime minister. Freeland's is a disaster. This is a disaster for the government. And obviously, she's saying now that she had the conversation with the prime minister on Friday. He said he no longer wanted her to be finance minister. He's going to move her to something else. And upon reflecting on that over the weekend, she came back and said, no, obviously I don't have your confidence. I'm not going to do this. And she clearly is not comfortable with where the government is headed. The letter she has written, the timing of this, the fact that she's done this on Monday morning, and she was supposed to be reading this thing in the House today at 4 o'clock, has just blown everything up. And so, this is one heck of a Monday morning.
Mm-hmm. And, this does seem like bad blood between Trudeau and Freeland. Let's talk about that statement that she put out today. Anything that stood out to you?
Well, I think seeing the statement in light of this thing she said to the media over the past number of days, when she's been asked about her position in the government and the tension with Trudeau, and her tearing up about that, and how it's an honor of her life to serve. Like, clearly she's been under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, and clearly I think there's a real disconnect between Minister Freeland, or former Minister Freeland, and Prime Minister Trudeau about how the economy needs to be managed right now, and trying to balance the political imperatives and the fact that this government appears to be headed for defeat whenever that election comes. And, so I think the prime minister trying to do things like, an HST rebate or HST break and the $250 check to try to drag up some numbers in the polls and try to get them to be in a competitive spot again. But meanwhile, it seems to me Freeland saying, but listen, there's a limit to what we can do. And so I think for her, this was a breaking point. And I think even if the prime minister, who knows, even if he hadn't been the one to say, I don't want this to continue, I think, they're clearly at odds. And for a prime minister and a finance minister to be in a tense relationship is normal. There is a healthy tension because of those political and economic imperatives that sometimes can collide. But I think this had reached a point of unhealthy tension where they weren't on the same page at all.
So, when I know it's early, but when you think about who could possibly step into her shoes, anyone come to mind for you?
I think anybody just be guessing at this point. If not for what happened in the half hour previous, I think Sean Fraser probably would have been somebody. But now, not that, right? Like, I think this is a crisis point for the government where as I understand that they are in a cabinet meeting right now. And something's going to have to happen. We can't not have a finance minister. So I think, something's going to have to come through here. But I think for Trudeau, again, this is a disaster. This is a moment where the government seems to be coming apart. And how does he continue from here? Even if he's got somebody shined up and ready to go, he's going to have to. But what happens now when this significant departure from someone who has been a loyalist to Trudeau. There, so much so that her own, there's been a kind of sense that even if she wanted to take over as leader someday, she couldn't, that wouldn't work because she's been so close to Trudeau. And so even that aspect of it, even if none of this other stuff was going on, the fact that Freeland is making the decision to step away is really a significant hit to whatever confidence Trudeau has left.
Could someone like Mark Carney be waiting in the wings? Could this be his shining moment? And if yes, is that going to do anything to change the trajectory that the Liberals find themselves on?
I think the trajectory question is a really interesting one, because it seems like, going back to your previous question, one of the key points in the letter from Freeland is her talking about the government having a limited time, right? Like I'm paraphrasing here, but something to that effect, right? That the government has kind of a finite period of time. Well, so does any government. But it seems like in the context of what's going on, given the numbers that Trudeau is looking at in the polls, and these have been sustained for a long time, there's a sense perhaps that Freeland is admitting that we don't have forever here, right? Like we are probably going to go down to defeat in the next election. That's what I'm reading in there, that she's acknowledging that. And therefore, they've only got a certain period of time in order to try to steer the economy in the right direction. Now, it seems to me that one key difference perhaps between Freeland kind of admitting that and Trudeau's perspective is that he never admits that. He doesn't even give a sign that he's admitting that, or that he even acknowledges that. And I think, that's a key aspect of how he is governing at this point, right? He is not acting like a prime minister with a finite amount of time. He's acting like a prime minister who's going to go win the next election. And the numbers don't bear that out. I mean, they're polls. I understand that. That's not an election. But there's still a kind of sense that there's not awareness on his part that this is coming to a close, or that's the likelihood. And that, I think, has a significant effect on how things are being run at this point.
What is it, do you think, between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but, at the beginning, it almost seemed like she was his right-hand woman. What has happened to cause this, relationship to deteriorate so much over the years?
I don't think almost his right hand. I think she absolutely was. And there have been times, I mean, I can think even during COVID, for example, when she was really, at the face of what the government was doing. We would often see him, doing the press conferences from his residence, and we'd see her in the press gallery having the conversations with the public, having the conversations about what the social distancing rules were and what the what the statistics were in terms of the spread of COVID and those sorts of things. Like, she was really in a leader's position. And we've been talking a lot about her as finance minister, but let's not forget she was also the deputy prime minister, which is not a position that any prime minister has to have. There doesn't have to be a deputy prime minister, right? Like that's up to the prime minister entirely. That's not something that is a portfolio every time. Many prime ministers haven't had them. But I think the fact that he named her his deputy prime minister really speaks volumes to the trust that he has in her and that he has had this whole time, apparently up until now. But I mean, she was one of his first star recruits. When he first became leader of the party and he was building toward a government back in 2013, 2014, she was one of the first people that he recruited to that team. And that, again, was a big moment for him in the sense that obviously she has an incredible career. She has incredible credentials. She's worked all over the world. She's got, she's got this book. She's got like all these things. She was an incredible get for him as a candidate and then as a minister. And so to see it unravel in this way, I think, a year ago, we would not have foreseen this.
So true. Lori, we will have to leave it there. Thank you so much for being here and for this analysis today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, too.